Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal Black Moon Lilith in the ninth house. And this is the last video of the series. I think that I put it at the end because I didn't think that I would be able to talk much about it. And when I do these types of videos, I do go online and look up astrology sites and see what they say. Not so that I can just parrot everything, regurgitate everything, but I want to know exactly what the themes are, especially for this particular series because I was having a hard time conceptualizing it. And I do think that with Lilith there are different points of view in terms of how it all manifests in a person's personality and behavior and attitudes. So, you just have to accept that there aren't going to be like cookie cutter um, beliefs about this particular influence. And so I have gone on several websites for this particular placement in the ninth house because I wasn't feeling any of them all that much. So I found a site called geoccult.org, and I'm going to talk about that and then reference Elsa, I think it's called .com, which also made a few good points. But one of the things that they were talking about here is because, the ninth house is the house of Sagittarius. So it has that theme of long distance travel. Anything that's about expansion, that's the ninth house. So whether you're expanding your mind by going to college or university, whatever you want to call it, higher learning, an institution of higher learning, whether, and you could be teaching there too, whether you are wanting to travel beyond your familiar territory to different countries with different cultures. It could be exploring a relationship with somebody of a different culture. All of these things, religion is part of the ninth house as well. And so we could say by extension, life philosophy. What do you believe is the meaning of life, and how do you conduct yourself to express that and to live by the tenets of whatever it is that you believe is the framework of life? So, when we're talking about Black Moon Lilith, I'm just going to shorten it to Lilith, we're talking about the energy of rebellion, of feeling like a person is misunderstood. So we can look at it from different angles. I've seen more than once from these sites them mention that it's similar to Pluto and how it presents itself. And while I agree with that, I think that there's also this idea of perhaps wanting the very thing that they are rebelling against. Whereas Pluto is all about transformation and kind of, shedding an old skin. So, a person, first and foremost, we can talk about religion. And what I do is I think there are three spiritual houses of the zodiac: the eighth house, the ninth house, and the 12th house. And I think that the eighth house represents the occult. That's Scorpio's domain, and it's all about astrology, the tarot, any kind of metaphysical pursuit, magical. If you think about shamanism, Wicca, or paganism, if you want to call it that, all of these things fall into the eighth house because they're not cookie cutter uh, paths. Now, if you study shamanism, there might be some rituals and maybe there are some things that you could follow very methodically. I don't know. But it seems to me that you have more agency um, from a spiritual perspective when you're dealing with eighth house matters Plus, they're more of the things that we would say are the taboos of the religious world that, were kind of kept from the populace, that kind of put them in the driver's seat for their connection to God, rather than the ninth house, which I see as that dogma, those organized religions where there was a middleman to God. So the person followed, it's like paint by numbers, connection to God. And this is no offense to anybody who follows an organized religion, by the way. I respect people's, you know, I respect anybody who wants to have a relationship with God or have knowledge of, their true meaning of life. So somehow there is something about this that you come into conflict with. The obvious things, one of the first things I thought about was anything that has to do with um, some kind of like abuse by the clergy, or even, I mean, this sounds like a little bit crazy, um, like seduction of the clergy. I actually had a play that I wrote when I was in my early 20s for that we put on for this competition, and it had the young woman in confessional, and she was kind of like trying to seduce the priest from the other side of the box. that's I think that's always the way my mind works. So the thing is that those kinds of things where there is some kind of a blurring of the lines, or the taboo, that's where the Pluto influence can really show up, is, gosh, I was almost saying God, but that's supposed to be sacrilegious. The idea of anything connected to sex and the clergy, whatever you want to call them, whether it's a priest or whatever, a pastor, is just so unthinkable, and it's supposed to be so wrong. But what about if there are experiences that lead to that? What does that mean? Does that make her a harlot, the woman that seduces the pastor? I actually know, not me personally, but sometimes priests do fall in love with, I'm sure either gender, but I know in particular a priest who left the priesthood and got married. And so that could be, one of those things. Why does the person do it? Are they deliberately trying to do something that is considered forbidden? I don't think so. I think it's because they are attracted to this area of life to begin with, in a very, probably in a very profound way. And so it naturally follows that they would be very connected to the person who is espousing this philosophy. Now, of course, I'm referring to people who are of legal age to be doing things like that. I'm not talking about underage people. Some of you may have seen a video that I'm recording this in 2022, where a young woman accuses a pastor of sexual abuse in front of the congregation after he was confessing some other kind of sin, or whatever you want to call it. And I think she was underage at the time. But the thing is that these things happen. So it's not far-fetched for me to talk about it, but they may not always happen in the exact same way. There may be times when there's a positive element in it, and it's not exploitation in a very clear-cut way. It's just like a natural falling in love or being attracted to somebody who happens to be in that position. But I think that at the very least, even if it's something that's more wholesome than you would imagine, it still is flying in the face of what is supposed to be, done in that environment. So um, that can be the rebellion. It's like I don't feel like I have to follow that kind of thing, or I don't want to follow it. Now, of course, I didn't see anything mentioned in any of these articles, but it's always possible, I think, that you may have been raised in a tradition that is not compatible with your state of being. Maybe it's way too restrictive. And this is why I do differentiate the eighth and ninth houses and the 12th house. The ninth house is, to me, the organized religion, and it has its own set of dogma, the do's and don'ts of that particular faith. And so the person who is rebelling against that, they're not rebelling against God necessarily, but they're rebelling against the man-made rules, very likely, that accompany those belief systems. And the same thing applies to the university. You may go to university and you may be the first in your family to do so, and you are so gung-ho about it only to find out or to feel that you're being indoctrinated and to kind of challenge these authority figures who kind of are the gatekeepers of those belief systems. And I think like Pluto, because they mention here, they use the phrase seamy side of the world to describe, the goings on and, what the person is dealing with. And that's exactly what I say about Pluto, is that it's the, seedy underbelly. And what does that really mean? Well, it simply means that there's a facade of something, and it may seem all perfect. Everything is just hunky-dory. And then when you dig deeper, you find out it's not all that pleasant. That it has its own... I remember years ago going with my partner to this Buddhist temple outside of Chicago, and my partner, was very into Buddhism at that time, just reading Buddhist texts, but not necessarily going to temples or anything. But I found out about this temple, and we visited it, and we were trying to go into the temple room, and they were doing some construction or something, so we couldn't actually, and they wouldn't let us sit there. I can't remember, there was no service or something, but we were like watching them working in this outer part, and my partner was engaging one of the monks and asking him about something, and he said, oh, well, in this lifetime I was told that I'm not going to be, I have to just work and stuff like that. And both of us, my partner and I, that didn't sit well with us, that somebody was telling him, okay, this lifetime you're just here to work, and you're not here to attain samadhi, not samadhi, but whatever, I don't know about nirvana, but whatever it is, satori, all those terms. But that's the thing about the control of organized religion. When people submit to some higher authority, and that's the danger of those kinds of situations. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown cult, but it can really seem like a cult because they're very controlling. And for some people, they crave that higher authority. They want somebody to tell them what to do and to do their thinking for them. So the reason I brought that up is that later on I read a story, might not have even been that long afterwards, where there was a sex scandal at that temple, and I don't know if it was the head of the temple got impregnated this girl. She might have been, I don't know if she was of age, but whatever. So the point is that we see religious scandals I was going to say all the time, but in this day and age, everything is so diffused that it's hard to keep it together. In the 80s, we had Jimmy Swaggart and James Baker. These had big empires, that came crashing down because of their indiscriminate behavior. But these are kind of red pilling events because they allow people to stop being so reverential to things that may not be all that they seem, and that's what we're talking about, what lies beneath. So you are the kind of person that may sense that, may want to, I don't know about expose it, but you just have that rebellion, and that applies to to academia as well. And that could be also as a professor. Sometimes professors go off the reservation and they are not willing to conform to the censorship requirements for what they're allowed to say as a teacher, and they just kind of go off on off the reservation about that. So that might be, I didn't see anything about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But one thing they said on the site that I found very interesting is that you might, and this is all my interpretation, so you would have to go to geoccult.org to read it from the horse's mouth yourself to maybe get a different view if I'm distorting this in some way. But my take on it was that you may idealize certain foreign countries. Maybe you think that they have the perfect system, the way that they do things or whatever, and you go there and then you're kind of rebellious against their foreign culture because it isn't something that you agree with for whatever reason. So the reason that I think that's very interesting is because it's like no matter where you go, you're causing trouble. But I'm kind of being facetious. I actually think that could be the sign of somebody who is open-minded, because a lot of times what happens these days is that when we talk about other cultures, I'm talking about it as an American, and in this, I am gonna go there, and I'm gonna say this woke culture, everything is respected because it's from a foreign culture. And speaking of academia, and this was long ago, this was probably about more than 15 years ago. I went back to college or university when I was in my 30s, and even into my 40s. I think I didn't graduate until I was about 42. And I had a professor who called herself a radical lesbian professor. That's how she wanted to be seen by everybody. And I just brought that up because I thought that was funny that that's what she called herself. But now that I think about it, it's even more ironic because she talked about this was when the Gulf War was going on, and so Muslims were being I don't know about targeted, but there was prejudice in some circles about Muslims because they blamed them for 9/11 and things like that. And for some reason, we were talking about and there was a Muslim woman who was one of the students, and she wore a hijab. In the area, where I was going to this college in Chicago, this university, it had a fairly large Middle Eastern population, so there were a lot of those types of students. I saw people in burqas, women in burqas, full blown in that environment. So the thing is, I brought up female circumcision, and I said, "Do we have to respect that?" And she's like, "Yep." And so that's when she jumped the shark. as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm trying, and I don't have this position, but I have it in the 10th house. I have Lilith in the 10th. So that's authority figure. So that'll work for that as well. The thing I'm trying to say here is that you may see the contradictions, that these people make when they have their philosophy of life, and it doesn't quite work. And they end up supporting the very thing that they are allegedly against. Now, you may just really be obsessed with going to a foreign country, and you get there and you're like criticizing their practices because it doesn't play out the way it did in the travel brochures or wherever you were looking at it from a one-dimensional perspective. So because the 9th house can be cultures. And a lot of, I think one of the reasons why I didn't really jibe with the other sites that I looked at is they almost seemed like they were talking about the 11th house, because what they were saying on some of these other sites is that you might be kind of this, I don't think they used the word activist, but you might be, into all these causes and, like those who are marginalized in society and things like that. To me, that would be more of the 11th house. And I'm sure there are some reasons why it works for the 9th house as well, but I just didn't resonate with that. But I'm going to bring that up anyway because I feel like that might be important to you. But it's like, what is the truth? They said that you might fall into the clutches of a guru because you become so extreme about it. It's like either rebelling or totally submitting to something. So watch out for that, especially if it involves travel, because then you're kind of isolated. You're like, if you travel to a foreign country because there's this ashram and you want to study under this charismatic leader, you could be like away from friends and family who could bring you back down to earth, and you're really like immersed in that. And another thing is like, they seem to be implying that you might have psychic gifts in this particular sector. They used the word occult too, which is interesting. Maybe it's that black moon part of it. But in any case, that can be used for good or not so much. So it's like that is the challenge of walking in the light, being above board. The 9th house represents truth because this is Sagittarius's domain, and that's my sun sign. So I think that I can vouch for that I think that honesty is very important to Sagittarians. And if you have Black Moon Lilith here, you may see how society tends to be full of lies, and you may rail against that. And maybe that can be really good for other people on some level, but by the same token, you have to practice what you preach, or then you're just kind of like a hypocrite. So in any case, I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.